Hello and thank you for joining us again on the Insider Track on Football Insider. This time me and my colleague David decided to dedicate this podcast to all things Merseyside. We did a long podcast on Everton and Liverpool. We've decided to split it into two parts. Today we're watching Everton. How are they looking going into the window? But don't worry, Liverpool fans, tomorrow we'll be catering for you. So make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out. And let's talk all things Everton in this transfer window. Hello and welcome to Insider Track. It's hot weather and it's also hotting up in the transfer window, isn't it, David? Did you like that intro? That was good.
Wow, classy.
Thought of that before I started. We are here to talk Everton. We're here to talk Liverpool. Of course we are, because I've got the Merseyside correspondent with David. How are you, David, mate?
Yeah, good. It's like you say, it's ramping up. So really busy time for us, isn't it? And it's starting to get really busy now. So it's exciting times.
It's only day 3.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's the mad thing.
I think you're already seeing as well with some of the stories that are coming out of sort of nowhere as well, that how unpredictable at times the transfer window is going to be. And if some of those sort of mad left field transfers are already starting to happen now, then, you know, we've still got a long way to go as well. So it's going to be a sort of a long and bumpy ride and really exciting for fans and obviously for us as journalists as well, digging for those stories.
Yeah, I think because of the World Cup squashing everything into this kind of middle bracket, it's going to make it a bit more carnage. I think I've said it before, the last weeks in June, beginning of July, I think are going to be absolutely bonkers, David. So we'll get the caffeine in, mate, so that we're good to go for that. But we've got plenty to crack on with and talk about. Before we do, please make sure you hit like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Thank you so much for the support so far. And we'll be here throughout the transfer window. I'll be talking to David a lot more. Obviously, let's begin with Everton, David, because you recently spoke about Liverpool. Don't worry, Liverpool fans. We'll come to you. We will cater for you, and we will talk about Liverpool too. But let's speak about Everton, mate. So much going on at that club. You've got boardroom changes, a lot of reports about the financial state of the club and how many players they can actually bring in. So why don't you just give me a synopsis before we go into kind of individuals? Why don't you give me a synopsis of the mood at Everton heading into the transfer window?
Yeah, I think there's an acknowledgement that it's a vital transfer window. I mean, there's mistakes of the past are still sort of coming back to haunt Everton at the moment, aren't they, in terms of the financial situation they find themselves in. So I know, you know, that hasn't completely eased or even close to eased at the moment. So they know that there's going to be some restrictions around what they can do. But I think this is a transfer window for being really intelligent. Sean Dyche needs strength, you know, to strengthen his squad in certain areas. And Kevin Thelwell, who's the director of football there, knows that he's going to have to be clever. I think it's going to be a window for looking at maybe some cheaper deals and are the free transfers out there? Are the loan opportunities that can come up? And you know, Everton's hands are tied and they know that. But there's still a lot to do in a lot of areas of the squad that need to be addressed because they don't want to find themselves in a similar situation again. So I think, you know, we're in the early stages of that. And when you're in the market that Everton are in, maybe your transfer business is not something that you wrap up really early in the window because you're competing with other clubs who are looking for those really cheap deals and things. I think it's going to probably drag on a little bit, which is unfortunate for them, but it's just the situation they find themselves in. So it is kind of early days for Everton at the moment, but there's a lot to come, I'm sure, because they do want to do business and they need to do business.
Well, yeah, I mean, they don't want to be in another relegation scrap, mate. And, you know, the last summer window, there was concern that they hadn't strengthened enough to get out of the position they were in. That became true. They have got a manager right now who's more than capable of helping them in the position they're in, but I doubt they want to be there every year in a relegation dogs fight. So let's talk about the board situation, David. What's happened there for anyone that's missed out over the last couple of weeks or week or so, sorry, I should say, with the changes on the board? Why don't you just give us a run through of what's happened there?
Yeah, sort of came out of left field, that really sort of mass resignations from the board. You know, the fans have been calling for that for a while, to be honest. They want this board to be reconstituted. It didn't seem like there was going to be any breakthrough on that publicly because there hasn't been an announcement of that external investment that Everton have been pursuing. But my understanding is that is getting much closer now. MSP seem to have won the race to invest in Everton. I know 7 partners were touted, weren't they, for a while in terms of they might be getting involved in some way, but MSP were ultimately granted exclusivity. We expect some sort of formal announcement on that sort of soon, and that'll be a big help in terms of taking the weight off of the stadium project. You know, that they'll have huge involvement in providing funds for that and capital, which is much needed, and hopefully that frees things up a little bit for Everton to look after itself as a business on the transfer side of things and running the football club rather than worrying about infrastructure. So what's happened now is those board resignations have happened, and we expect that there's going to be a reconstitution of the board. That there are going to be some figures who are involved in MSP are going to come in and replace those people. The one thing that needs to work itself out at the moment is the Bill Kenwright situation. Now, he is still the chairman, he's still on the board. But it was said in Everton's initial statement around those resignations that there'd be more clarity on Kenwright's future in the next 48 hours. Now, that deadline has passed, much to the frustration of a lot of fans, understandably. It seems that some more details are being worked out there, and that's a little bit more complex to untie him from the board. But there's hope that will be resolved, and we'll be looking at a new look Everton board hopefully soon, and that will give everyone a little bit of clarity and hopefully some new purpose going into this summer window. Because as we say, it's such an important time for Everton. They need key decision makers to be in place and real clarity on what everyone's roles are and where they fit into things, because some really important and big decisions need to be made in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, and I'm certainly hearing from Everton fans, Fraser, tell us something. Tell us a player that's coming in. And the problem is you've got uncertainty within the board about who's making the decisions. And we were talking about right at the start that the short space of time of this window with everything happening so fast. And they're also shopping in a very saturated market, Everton, this summer, with the free transfers maybe they're trying to get, or those that are coming to the last years of their deals. There's a lot of clubs in that market, David. So they need to make decisions quickly and start moving, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. This is it. I mean, it's like I think that there is that urgency from the football staff in terms of they want to get Sean Dyche's squad sorted as soon as possible. They want to know what he's going to be working with by the pre-season period, but also an acknowledgement that because these changes are ongoing behind the scenes and there isn't that clarity there in terms of the decision making above the football operation. They have to hang in there a little bit, and it makes it more difficult. Like you say, when you're working in that market where you're looking for those bargains, that is a competitive market for a club like Everton. So it just adds up to a difficult situation for them. But like I say, hopefully clarity soon on the board side, and hopefully then some real decisions and some real action can start being taken in terms of building a squad that Sean Dyche needs to get Everton way out of the relegation battle next season and hopefully comfortably into mid-table.
Yeah, that's the next steps for them, isn't it? We'll talk on a number of targets, Dave, but we'll talk on the kind of market they're looking at now. Everton fans watching this probably know all about the board situation, so probably don't need us to talk. That was more for anyone that didn't know. Really interesting situation for Everton. Let's talk about Jordan Pickford here, David, because Pickford is still wanted by a number of clubs. He's a goalkeeper that's admired. Tottenham now moving on to David Raya. They're closing in on him. My understanding there is personal terms are done verbally, without the signature. And they're closing in on a deal with Brentford. Man United have looked at Pickford. He's had interest from West Ham as well, although that might be quite difficult for them to do financially. He's got a long-term deal, but as we've seen with Caicedo, doesn't often mean anything. Is that more Everton? Would you expect bids this summer, or do you think that could be something that's maybe January or next year?
Yeah, the difference I would make with the Caicedo deal, for example, is that maybe with Caicedo, I think there was clearly wasn't there, an agreement with Brighton of, okay, you sign this new deal, we'll get you on big money, and then in the summer we'll look at it. This is what we would expect to get for you. With Pickford, I think it was very much, sign the new contract. We want to recognise how key a player you are. Hopefully we'll stay up and you can be a cornerstone of us, moving right back up the table in the years ahead. But there's also acknowledgement there that, if a big offer came in for Pickford, he's such an obviously saleable asset that would help generate funds that could be used across the squad, the wider squad. And they wouldn't stand in his way if for example, if a Manchester United came in and offered him that opportunity. So it's not quite as clear cut as Everton desperate to sell him or anything like that. But I think it's not something you could rule out either. I think there's a possibility there. If anyone, one of those huge clubs really firms up their interest, then Pickford would probably go with Everton's blessing. They would want to secure a big fee because they know that they've got work to do on other areas of the squad, and that would be a way of doing it. But it's one of those, until one of those clubs really does firm up their interest, it's not like Everton are banking on that money or looking to move him on. It's just one where they've got to see what happens really in terms of who's going to come in for Pickford and if they will at all, because let's not rule out that he starts the Premier League season in between the sticks for Everton, because I think that's a real major possibility at the moment still.
Yeah, I think it's likely he will, to be honest, from what I understand, that he will be in sticks, because not only that, his price is going to be high, David, and you've got the likes of Onana available for around the 60 million mark. You've got Silva in Porto, 50 odd million euros. There's better perhaps deals to be done for clubs who are wanting to strengthen in multiple areas. Away from a player like Pickford on a long-term deal to those out of contracts, Yerry Mina, you've got Connor Cody's deal, which we can talk about, coming to an end as well with Wolves. You've got the two goalkeepers, David. You've got Coleman, although we do know that that's obviously, Coleman's getting an extension. We expect Vinagre to leave the club. So there's a lot of players who potentially might not be there next season, which creates more problems because they need replaced. So why don't you talk through some of those, David, who are coming at the end of their deal and what your understanding is of those situations? Start with Cody for us, for example.
Yeah, Connor Cody. So obviously the decision was made there not to sort of pay out that permanent fee, which is agreed, which understands around 4.5 million now. On the surface, sort of looks like a no-brainer, particularly when you think back to where he was under Frank Lampard in terms of he was a key man really at the start of the season and playing really well. But I think Everton just acknowledged that they've got options in defence. The money is tight. Do you need to spend 4.5 million on a player who clearly the new manager doesn't quite fancy? Is he tall enough to be a centre half in a back four for Sean Dyche? I would argue probably not. So then your only real use of him then is an occasional backup and sometimes that odd switch to back three that Sean Dyche, I think he did it once in the back end of the season. So you're not going to use him that frequently really. So I think that was a sensible decision. As good as a player and as good as a player to have around the dressing room Cody was, I think that was a smart decision really, and particularly when you consider as well that Everton have got Jared Branthwaite coming back from a loan at PSV Eindhoven, where he's really sort of proven himself and looks a really promising player. So I haven't quite got clarity on this yet, but I'm hoping to see opportunities for him next season. To be honest, he's coming back into the fold now and looks like he could be a real potential option for Everton. So I think with that in mind, that Cody decision makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, Branthwaite's been brilliant. If Everton managed to keep him this summer, I will add. I think he's got a lot of people who would be keen to take him as well. And the Cody deal, my understanding is if Frank Lampard was still in charge, Connor Cody would probably be an Everton player this summer.
100%.
But I think with Dyche coming in, he trusts Tarkowski, he trusts Keane, he used Yerry Mina. What's happening with Mina? Because obviously, again, another contract that we've been talking about a lot. David, what's your latest on that?
Yeah, so Mina will be leaving the club this summer. Been a great servant for Everton down the years and a real fan favourite. But I think, injuries in recent years have just really hit him. And I think, again, one that made sense. I don't think Everton needed to be sort of chasing that contract and throwing money at it for a player who's sort of, slightly on the slide now and is on big wages as well. I think it just made sense really for a partner of the ways at this point.
Yeah, big wage as well. Big wage as well, and they need to make room for a number of reasons. Premier League regulations, financial fair play, moving into this summer. 30th of June is a key date for a lot of clubs as well to get some people off the wage bill or out the club before it moves into the next kind of year. So that's an important one. They have got Coleman set to sign an extension as well, David, which is good news. The ultimate professional, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great news as well because he's such a big person around the place, and when he saw that he got that knee injury at Leicester, sort of feared the worst really that would be his last Everton appearance. Great news that the injury is not quite that bad, and he can hopefully play a big role next season when he gets back to full fitness, and that he's going to sign a new contract shortly is our understanding, and that I think all Evertonians really pleased to hear that. Yeah,
fantastic news for Coleman. And wait, I'd get that injury actually. I remember thinking, oh God, no, it's a bit like. You've seen many, I always reference Rangers, but you see like Stephen Davis, for example, got an injury and you're like, oh, please no. These guys that have been professionals for so long, but he looks like he's going to set to stay as well, which is fantastic news for Everton and Everton fans. Andre Onana has still got a lot of interest in him. Amadou Onana, sorry, Andre Onana is a different Onana. Amadou, it's like the Dembele problem I used to have. There used to be about 8 of them as well. Amadou Onana is got a lot of interest in him. David, my understanding that he's on Chelsea's list. Now, there's been some reports, talks have started. My understanding is that is not the case between clubs. There's been no conversations, but he's on the list. And again, being on a list is very far away from being transferred. So just to make that clear, and a number of clubs lists, a talented young player who Everton, of course, will be keen to make sure they hold on to this summer, surely.
Yeah, I think with Onana, I think we've seen real flashes of his promise at Everton, and there's clearly a really good player there, which is why the clubs who have been linked with him, the names that you see in there are such high profile and big clubs. the one thing I would say is there'd probably be less reluctance to let him go than there would be for, say, a Pickford. I think Everton know that they've got a player there that they could flip for decent profit, who they could probably replace a little easier in terms of what he is around the club and influence in the squad. He's only been there one season, and as decent as he's been, they probably think that is a player that they could probably replace a little easier for possibly cheaper as well. So if they can flip him for a big profit, that would be huge. That's exactly the approach Everton know that they need to be taking these days, to be honest. That's something they really lost in recent years, and that's why they've been hemorrhaging money, is because they've been signing players on big wages for big money and getting no return on them whatsoever. Whereas in Onana, who is a young player who's got real sky high potential, possibly coming in for a year and then maybe flipping him for a humongous profit, reinvesting that back in the squad. That's exactly the approach Everton will want to take going forward. So I think nothing yet in terms of concrete interest being followed up or any real inquiries to Everton in terms of what they would expect. But I think, that's certainly one to keep an eye on. And I'm not massively convinced that Everton would fight tooth and nail to keep him in the way that they would with Jordan Pickford. I think, if there's a big profit to be made there, that maybe he could move on. And like I say, that money would be so crucial to invest in other areas of the squad.
I mean, you're probably, what was it, 35 million, I think David is signing for, if I'm not mistaken. You're probably nearly doubling your money for him, aren't you?
That's the talk is around 70 million, which is it'd be crazy to turn it down. I think
I'll be honest, I don't think they're getting 70 million for him at the moment. I think they probably hit the 60, but I mean, still, you're 35 to 60. They need to be looking at the Brighton model. They need to be looking at the model of these clubs. That's just the sphere Everton are in at the moment. And to be doing that, unless, of course, Sheikh Jassim doesn't get Man United and thinks, do you know what, I'll go and buy Everton. That's what needs to be done. But from a business point of view, let's talk about a couple of players here that are Tom Davies. We expect to go this summer. David, he's obviously been close to an exit now for a while. He's struggled with injuries, struggled with game time, and there's interest in him from Italy as well, I understand, and England, and all over the place.
But the fact it's got to this point now where he's out of contract soon and he's clearly assessing his options. Yeah, I just think he's got to think at this point, because of the injuries had, the struggles he's had in terms of carving out a regular first team place under Sean Dyche. I just think it's a good time for him to move on personally, and I think we've had no real confirmation from his side of things that is exactly the route he's going to go down yet. But my suspicion is that that's what's going to happen. Particularly, like you say, there's offers from abroad where might just give him a fresh lease of life and an opportunity to try something new. So, I almost personally would like to see him go down that route and really sort of reinvigorate his career.
I feel like he needs a move at this point. And that is concerning for Everton. The point you've just made there about him assessing his options. I've always had a soft spot for Everton. James McFadden, Big Dunk, Walter Smith, Stephen Naismith. So it's Nathan Patterson just now. They've got the Scottish vibe going on. But there's a lot of players assessing their options. Alex Iwobi, another one who's been offered a new deal. I understand it's a 4-year deal, as I put out in my report. We're still waiting for confirmation that has actually been done. My understanding is he was assessing options from around Europe as well and want to see where the club was. Perhaps they're looking at who's coming in potentially as well, David. Demarai Gray is another one, David, I believe, who's coming close as well. So what's the latest on Demarai Gray?
Yeah, I think there's a frustration from his side of not having been involved massively towards the end of the season. Is he a Sean Dyche player? Possibly not. Certainly the teams he was picking suggested that he, didn't have huge faith in him and doesn't maybe see him as a major option going forward. So for him, I think he is having a look out there, seeing if there are clubs that could come in for him. And if he could possibly get a move. It's not one that's nailed on yet, but I think that's definitely one to keep an eye on, because I think, like I say, from Gray's side, I get the impression that he would like to be playing regularly week in, week out somewhere, and maybe that's not going to happen for him under Sean Dyche at Everton. So again, a possible opportunity. They got him in for a very cheap fee under Rafa Benitez. Maybe an opportunity to make a little bit of profit there and put that back into the coffers and reinvest that in the team, perhaps, particularly for a player who the manager's not going to massively rely on. So we'll have to see how that sort of pans out as the summer progresses.
Yeah, Gray out of contract 2024, I believe, David, as well. I think he's got 1 year left. Yeah, just because I said he was coming to the end there. It's 2024, just to be clear, not this summer. But yeah, certainly one to watch. A lot of clubs looking at him. Maybe those that are coming up as well might be quite an interesting wee spot for Demarai Gray. I'd like to talk about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, David. I know we can't do an Everton podcast really without talking about him. he's got 2 years left. He's been obviously touted for massive moves in the past. The injuries have maybe stumbled that for him a little bit. They need to keep hold of him, don't they? Because the cost to replace someone like him when he's fit is far too high. But they also now are running the risk of getting into those later years of the deal where it starts to become what you could lose him for free, potentially. What do you think happens with Calvert-Lewin now? Do you think it's a move, or do you think could Everton tie him down for a bit longer?
Yeah, I think because it's 2 years at the moment, I think they've just got that nice cushion where they know, okay, in a normal circumstance, if he was fit and firing every week and scoring constantly, then, 2 years, you'd be getting really nervous about it. But it's actually a bit of a sweet spot at the moment because he's played such little football over the last 2 seasons and the goals have dried up a little bit because of those injury problems. And, like I say, it's almost a sweet spot in terms of, okay, the ideal situation probably for Calvert-Lewin and for Everton is that he has one more season. He tries to stay fit for as long as possible, score as many goals as he can, and then then you've got the potential. Then, if you're Everton, okay, we may have to sell you now, but you've had a great season, and there's all this interest has come back in for you. We can sell you for a bumper fee, hopefully. And for the players' perspective, you've played yourself back into form. You're getting the likes of Arsenal maybe coming back in for you. These big clubs who were linked in the past. So I think almost the ideal situation now is to take this one more season and just see if you can get him back in fitness and form and scoring again. Because like I said, I think that suits Everton, because if they get a prime Calvert-Lewin back, then they won't be anywhere near the relegation zone next season. But it also suits the player in terms of his ambitions to go and play Champions League football or whatever, or European football, to get back in form this season and show he can do it at Everton again.
Yeah, and I think there's been some frustration because from Everton fans, understandable that there's not 9-10 names linked to them at the moment, or very concrete stories coming out. And obviously we spoke at the start about the things that need to get fixed first in the background, perhaps, for that as well. Maybe other players to tie down. Neil Maupay, very, very quite likely to leave this summer, David. We do know that. I mean, he has got a lot of interest. It's just not worked for him as well. And then also along with him, mate, if you can give us Ellis Sims, who was here in Scotland, did fantastically well at Hearts, did brilliantly at Sunderland, and has come into the squad and shown glimpses of what he could be. He's only 22 years old as well, but he's coming into the last year of his deal also. So talk to me about Maupay and Sims.
Yeah, so Maupay, I expect to leave definitely this summer. I think his agent is currently in the process of sounding out clubs and seeing what's out there for him. It just hasn't worked for him. He's not a Sean Dyche type player, really. And I thought he was an odd signing as a Calvert-Lewin backup in the first place, because they're very different profiles. And the type of striker that Everton need is not really a Neil Maupay. So I expect him to leave this summer. I think the same actually goes for Sims, even though, I think people get this impression about Sims that because he's quite a big lad and he looks like he could throw himself about, that he is that target man type. But really, he's sort of proven it when I watched him at Sunderland. He's more of a fox in the box, really, and not really a Calvert-Lewin in terms of backing into defenders and holding up the ball. That's not his game, which I think is why you didn't see an awful lot of him when he got recalled from loan under Sean Dyche, because he isn't that type of player that Sean Dyche likes to use up there, which is why I think that there is interest around him from Championship clubs, real interest to bring him back, and it could be a permanent deal this time, I think, because I don't think there's an obvious future for him at Everton under Sean Dyche. I think there are other strikers who he's going to look at in pre-season who's come through the academy. So, for example, I wrote a story today that Tom Cannon, who was really successful on loan in the Championship at Preston last season, Sean Dyche is very keen to have a look at him and see what he can do. And the player himself really wants to prove that he can be a viable alternative to Calvert-Lewin this season. So he's going to get the chance to prove that. And I think that opens the door for not just Maupay to leave, but also Ellis Sims as well. So possibly permanent deals on the table for both of those.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, Maupay, it's just not worked, is it, in the short time he's been there? And listen, I understand he wasn't probably the desirable striker when they actually brought him in. We know that they were working hard to try on a number of targets during that time, and it just didn't work out, and Maupay was available, and they were in a very desperate situation. I don't mean that in a derogatory term towards Maupay. I just mean they had to get somebody in. Yeah. And maybe it was a move that didn't actually naturally suit both parties anyway, but it needed to be done, and that's certainly kind of the way it's turning out. Couple of targets, David. Let's talk about strikers. Everton need to get somebody in. They have to get someone up front in this window. Calvert-Lewin, as brilliant as he is just too injury prone. I can talk to you first about Morelos if you like, or do you want to go first? What would you want to do?
Yeah, no, I know you've definitely got some info on the Morelos one, and that's a name that's been bandied around this week.
Yeah, Morelos has been spoken about quite a lot. I've read a few articles, and I'm not here to that's all the journalists' information, but I'll just tell you what I know about the situation and being quite close to that with his Rangers ties and stuff. My understanding to that is that Everton were offered the opportunity to speak to Alfredo Morelos and perhaps bring him on, and it's just not moved from that point. So being close or any deals that he's signed and stuff, in my understanding, and I could be proved wrong, but I'm fairly confident to say it, my understanding is that that's not the case at this point in time. It would be unlikely that he'll join Everton, but he's a player who's got lots of offers, but Everton looking at other targets, perhaps, David, maybe some that you would know of, but like I said, it's difficult times because of all that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so one of the names that keeps getting thrown out is Wout Weghorst. Obviously, probably looking to move on from Burnley again this summer if possible. Particularly, he's that target man type as well that maybe Dyche would like to play with. But like I say, Pete O'Rourke has written that he's not a target for Everton, so that's an interesting one. Another name that keeps getting popping up is Moussa Dembele. Obviously, he's leaving Lyon on a free transfer this summer, and has scored a lot of goals throughout his career. He was a player. My understanding was a player who Everton inquired about in January. Actually, under Frank Lampard, they were quite keen to get him in at that point if they could. The deal didn't materialise. There hasn't quite been an approach yet this summer. That's not to rule him out completely, but I would suggest that they know that there's going to be a lot of competition from him, particularly from teams who are probably playing around Europe. So, that's one. If Everton were very, very desperate to get him, you'd think they'd be trying all they could do to maybe steal a march on the rivals and getting in there and negotiating a deal ASAP. And that currently isn't happening. So that suggests to me that maybe he's not right at the top of the list, or Everton are just going to, if they're going to push it late in the window, then they may be going to get caught out and face some competition there. So one to keep an eye on, and probably not what you could completely rule out, but again, at the moment, it just doesn't look like anything's happening on that front. So not one for fans to get excited about at the moment.
Yeah, I'd reported in January about Everton's approach. Myself, David, I'm sure you were on it as well. Multiple journalists were, and we knew that Everton had asked the question at least in January. I think we can say that safely, but I don't think it materialised too much. Dembele has also got a lot of interest in him from Italy. We understand he's got interest in him from Germany as well, and then other Premier League clubs too, David. So he's got a lot of options on the table, which maybe puts them in a bit of a wage bidding war, if you like, that maybe Everton won't want to enter. So that could be one too. Weghorst, I think he would be phenomenal under Sean Dyche. I think, it's just something that needs to happen. I think it wasn't given a long enough time last time, perhaps, and how things work. I think at Everton it'd be great. We'll wait and see on that one as well. But I think there's other issues first and foremost for Everton to sort, and then you'll start to see the transfers coming in. We will keep you updated on Everton as we get it. I will also note we're recording this at 12 o'clock on Friday, and you're watching it on Sunday. So if Weghorst is signed for Everton in the last 48 hours, don't blame us, right? We're doing it on the Friday. And we're done with Everton, I think, David, unless there's anything else from Everton you need to cover.
Yeah, no, it's kind of quiet at Everton at the moment, so I think that's your lot. Although we've managed to get half an hour out of it, but I'm sure it'll start to really ramp up soon.
We're good. It's going to be a long podcast. That's all right. It's Sunday. You've nothing else to do, so you may as well stay and watch.